This is the Italy that we know today. It is currently made up of 20 regions, similar to our states. There are 8 regions in the north, 5 regions in central Italy, and 7 regions in the south. The Italians refer to southern Italy as Il Mezzogiorno, which loosely translates to midday, and the theory is that the sun is directly overhead in the south at midday. Prior to the unification of Italy in 1861, this peninsula was divided at various times throughout history into separate and distinct countries, governments, and kingdoms. Here's a few examples. Il Mezzogiorno, in particular, was ruled by Greece from the 8th century BC until 272 BC, the date of the Roman conquest. In fact, the coastal regions of Puglia, Basilicata, Calabria, Sicily, and Campania were referred to as Magna Graecia, which seems appropriate given that that's 8,000 years of Greek rule. Following the Pyrrhic Wars, that's Rome against Greece, and the 3 Punic Wars, Rome against Carthage, Rome ruled southern Italy and most of Italy and most of the world from 272 BC until 402 AD. After the fall of the Roman Empire, the Goths, the Visigoths and Ostrogoths, an Eastern Germanic people, ruled southern Italy through most of the 5th and the first half of the 6th century. Then came Constantine and the Byzantines, and Constantine ruled from 552 to 568 AD. This was followed by the Lombards, a Germanic people, who ruled from 568 AD until 774. Charlemagne, king of the Franks, defeated the Lombards, and the Franks ruled southern Italy from 774 until the late 10th century. The Arab Muslims, or Saracens, dominated both Sicily and southern Italy in most of the 9th and the 10th centuries. The Normans, French people descended from the Vikings and the Norsemen, ruled from 999 until 1139, and they established the Kingdom of Sicily in 1130. The House of Hohenstaufen, Germans, conquered the Kingdom of Sicily and installed Frederick II as the King of Sicily, and he ruled from 1198 until 1266. Beginning in 1266, the French, under Charles I, as Charles of Anjou, ruled from 1266 to 1282, followed by the Spanish under Peter III and the House of Aragon from 1282 until the 14th century. Throughout the 14th, 15th, and 16th centuries, southern Italy was ruled by Spanish, French, and Austrians. Austria until the 18th century. Napoleon and his army defeated the Austrians, and Napoleon ruled from 1797 to 1815. Napoleon established the Kingdom of Italy in March 17, 1805, and declared himself the King of Italy. In 1816, the Kingdom of Sicily which had existed from 1130 until 1816, and the Kingdom of Naples, which had existed from 1282 until 1816, joined together to become the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, which existed from 1816 until 1861. In 1860, Garibaldi led the fight for independence, and Victor Emmanuel II was declared the King of Italy. This was followed by Risorgimento, the unification of Italy, in 1861. It should be pointed out that anyone who does research into the history of this part of the world may find dates that are somewhat different than what you see here, and that's because much of what happened over long periods of time. It was common for there to be wars ongoing and for the power to be constantly wrested from one country to another. So dates may actually overlap, but what is shown here are fairly good approximations of the historical period. Following Risorgimento, southern Italy experienced a dramatic decline. Its already weak economy suffered even more. Organized crime was rampant, and there was a lack of effective government. The regions to the north resented the inclusion of their poor Italian neighbors in the new country, and most of the country's money, power, industry, infrastructure, and military strength was concentrated in the north. This led to massive emigration, known as the Italian diaspora. But enough history. Let's look now at what you can expect to experience in southern Italy today. In particular, we're going to visit the areas that I like to call Southernmost Italy, the three regions of Puglia, Basilicata, and Calabria. The Italian boots heel, Puglia, instep, Basilicata, and toe, Calabria, are where southern Italy shows all its throbbing intensity. Long stereotyped as the poorer, more passionate cousins of Italy's sophisticated northerners, these regions are finally being appreciated for their true richness. Yes, throughout Il Mezzogiorno, you will see washing on weather-worn balconies, scooters speeding down medieval alleys, and ancient towns crumbling under Mediterranean suns. But look past the stereotypes, and you'll find things altogether more complex and wonderful. Gritty, unsentimental cities, with pedigrees stretching back thousands of years. Dramatically broken coastlines that have harbored fisherfolk and pirates for millennia. And above all, proud and generous people eager to share these delights with you. We begin our visit in the region of Puglia, also called Apulia. Puglia's long coastline along the Adriatic Sea, and its relatively short distance from lands to the east, made it a frequent stop for ships and an easy target for invaders. Here you will find ancient towns heavy with the tangible past, extravagant churches dreamt up by Europe's finest architects, the footprints of an endless procession of conquerors and cultures, stamped in stone, gold, and marble, seas of olives, olive green seas, and food the equal of any in Italy. While much of southern Italy was once part of Magna Graecia, several towns in southern Puglia still retained their Greek heritage. This area, called Grecia Salentina, is a group of 11 towns south of Lecce whose whitewashed walls, architecture, and even language are reminiscent of Greece. In most of the Grecia Salentina towns, a dialect of Greek is still spoken and taught in schools. Many signs are posted in both Italian and Greek, and sometimes also in English. Most of these towns have beautiful and interesting historic centers. To serve the Roman Empire, the Romans established important ports in Puglia, taking full advantage of its geographic location. The famous Appian Way, which starts in Rome, finishes in Brindisi. Its end is still marked by one surviving Roman column. The next period to have left a bold impression on Puglia's landscape was the Middle Ages. During this time, grand churches were built in Puglia's distinctive version of Romanesque style, with added elements influenced by the area's commerce with the East. In the 13th century, Puglia was ruled by the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II, who built a string of castles throughout the region. The following slides show three popular ones, the most notable of which is the Castel del Monte, built in the 1240s. But no visit to the Puglia region would be complete without a stop in Alberobello. There you will find a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a 16th century village with conical-shaped drywall buildings constructed of stone but without mortar, the Trulli of Alberobello. Our next stop will be the instep, Basilicata. Like Puglia and Calabria, and also Sicily, Basilicata was inhabited, invaded, and conquered at one time or another by all the countries we mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. Evidence of this multicultural influence is visible throughout Basilicata in the ancient structures that remain in various parts of the region, in the nuances of the dialect spoken here, in its cuisine, and in the physical characteristics and DNA of its people. Today, Basilicata is experiencing an increase in tourism as people around the world discover the charm of the simple life in its ancient towns. Monterscoglioso, the home of my ancestors and the current home of 4 generations of my cousins, is one of those towns. Also among the attractions in Basilicata today are innovative hotel concepts to house the tourists. And a landscape that has gained notoriety for its use in Hollywood films. Perhaps the most visited city in Basilicata is Matera. Somewhat confusing, Matera is also the name of one of the 2 provinces in this region. Potenza is the other. The city, Matera, is the capital of the Matera province and was the capital of Basilicata from 1663 until 1806. The current capital is, you guessed it, Potenza, the capital of Potenza. Known as La Città Sotterranea, the subterranean city, Matera is one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world, having been inhabited since the 10th millennium BC. Its historical center, Sassi, along with the Park of the Rupestrian Churches, was designated as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO in 1993. The Sassi originate from prehistoric times and are suspected to be among the first human settlements in Italy. There is evidence that people were living there as early as the year 7000 BC. The Sassi are houses dug into the chalcogenitic rock itself. The streets in some parts of the Sassi often run on top of other houses. The following photos were taken as we wandered around the Sassi. This is one place where the photos just don't do justice. You have to see it to believe it. Because the Sassi are reminiscent of ancient sites in and around Jerusalem, they have been used in many Christian-themed films, including The Gospel According to St. Matthew, 1964, The Passion of the Christ, 2004, The Nativity Story, 2006, and Ben-Hur, the remake, in 2016. They also served as the site of Wonder Woman's birthplace. Check out the CGI changes that were made to the actual landscape for the setting that was used in the 2017 film. Our next stop here in southernmost Italy is Calabria. More than 40% of Calabria is mountainous, 50% is hilly, and less than 10% is flat. It is bordered on the west by the Tyrrhenian Sea and to the east by the Ionian Sea. At its tip, it is a short ferry ride across the Strait of Messina to Sicily. Its 500-mile shoreline includes rugged cliffs and beautiful sandy beaches, but few resorts. The Greeks called what is now Calabria Italia. Eventually, the Romans applied that name to all of southern Italy and then to the entire peninsula. So the Calabrese like to call themselves the original Italians. Unfortunately, the region's economic development is hindered by its rugged terrain, frequent earthquakes, limited government funding, and the presence of the Calabrian Mafia, referred to as La 'Ndrangheta. As the Sicilian Mafia has declined, so 'Ndrangheta has strengthened. These are really brutal guys who don't hesitate to kill, even women and children. They are strongest in the Reggio Calabria area, close to Sicily, and resisted in the rest of the region. The Calabrian landscape features many small towns and villages built into the hillsides, surrounded by lush greenery. One such town is Acre, the home of my ancestors on my father's side. In addition, there are frequent reminders of the region's history and strategic importance provided by the many castles that are found throughout. As we marveled at all this beauty and historical significance, we were struck by the fact that no one comes here. The families that left Calabria may be gone, but they are not forgotten. Here, as in Montescaglioso, we found handwritten records that document a family's history, from birth to death, including major events such as marriage, birth of a child, and departure from the city. As previously mentioned, following the unification of Italy in 1861, Risorgimento, the North prospered while the South struggled. At the turn of the century, deplorable conditions led to massive emigration, the Italian diaspora, including the arrival of many of our ancestors to the United States. Well, that's the end of our tour of southern Italy. I hope you have enjoyed it and learned something of our history. I will close with this note. Most recently, there have been signs of a renaissance in Il Mezzogiorno, and the regions of Puglia, Basilicata, and Calabria are beginning to enjoy positive economic growth. There is optimism that the natural beauty of these regions, their historical significance, and most of all, the determination of their people, will lead to a brighter future. I enthusiastically recommend that you visit these regions, Calabria, Basilicata, and Puglia, and see for yourself what the world has been missing.